I've noticed again over years that when things get tough, school leaders double down and they do more of what they're already doing. They'll add more time to their days, so their days are longer. They'll try to do things in less time to get more done. And they want to go it alone. They actually turn inward and they endeavour to work faster, think harder, and push through alone. And that's exactly the wrong move. The instinct makes sense because it's what got most leaders to where they are. That self-sufficiency is often rewarded early in a leadership career. But the problem is that the strategies that helped you manage a manageable workload stop working when it becomes unmanageable. And for most school leaders right now, it is unmanageable. It sounds counterintuitive, but what we need to do is rather than look inward, we need to look outward. Welcome to Trailblazing Schools, the podcast for educational leaders at the intersection of leadership, complexity, and intelligent technology. I'm Trudy Graham. This is a space for leaders navigating uncharted territory. We explore strategic leadership, ethical innovation, and how AI can strengthen the deeply human work of education. When it comes to overwhelm, I've described modern school leadership as being like a pressure cooker. Your work is the contents in the pot. The people, the problems, the decision, your thinking space, it sits there. The volume of your work, the complexity of your work, and the stakes of what you do are like turning up the heat on that pressure cooker. And then you put the lid on with all of the constraints. Your limited time, limited resources, minimal support, and the sense of going it alone. And you're the leader with your very human limits within the system, your cognitive load, decision fatigue, emotional regulation, and working memory all stretched to the limits. And the pressure can't be removed, so therefore it has to be regulated. And the question is, how do you regulate that pressure? What's the release valve, so to speak, so that leaders can keep thinking clearly and move forward? What are the regulators that have the potential to help release that pressure? And that's where my work with school leaders over the last decade, and particularly in the last 3 years, have really brought some things to light for me. I've noticed that there are 3 unique components of my work that I have observed make the biggest impact for school leaders. And I'm now thinking about them in terms of shared thinking, augmented thinking, and solution-focused thinking. I'm not claiming that these eliminate the sense of overwhelm entirely, and I definitely don't pretend that it doesn't exist. But I believe these types of thinking genuinely and sustainably reduce that sense of overwhelm. I'll come back to this. In my last episode, I was mapping out the architecture of overwhelm and I was describing how it has 5 layers. I call them volume, the sheer amount of work that school leaders are faced with. Complexity, because we actually work in organisations that are complex. The stakes, the high stakes and the consequences of the decisions and the work that we do as school leaders. The constraints that we work within, so limited time, limited resources, limited support, the sense of going it alone. And as I've just mentioned, the human limits. There's a limit to what we can do as humans. And I hope that within that episode, I gave you some language for what you've been carrying. Perhaps even just being able to recognise what's going on gives you a little bit more sense of freedom or release around how you're feeling. But here's the interesting thing about pressure. I've noticed again over years that when things get tough, school leaders double down and they do more of what they're already doing. They'll add more time to their days, so their days are longer. They'll try to do things in less time to be able to do more tasks. In other words, to get more done. And they want to go it alone. They actually turn inward and they endeavour to work faster, think harder, and push through alone. And that's exactly the wrong move. The instinct makes sense because it's what got most leaders to where they are. That self-sufficiency is often rewarded early in a leadership career. But the problem is that the strategies that helped you manage a manageable workload stop working when it becomes unmanageable. And for most school leaders right now, it is unmanageable. It sounds counterintuitive, but what we need to do is rather than look inward, we need to look outward. And expanding the thinking opportunities that are available to you in 3 specific ways. And each of the 3 keys address a different part of the overwhelm architecture that I've already described. So let's have a look at those 3 keys again. Shared thinking, augmented thinking, and solution-focused thinking. So the first one, shared thinking. And this is where leaders were never meant to think alone. Okay, backstory here. So 2017, I'm an assistant regional director, and part of my role is to actually work with up to 30 school leaders across a regional area. And I was looking at the Australian Principal Occupational Health, Safety and Wellbeing Survey. And it was the 2017 results. Now, I know that because I actually went back to my notes. And look, understand that survey has continued now, started in 2011. So we're 14 years down the track. So when I was taking these particular notes, it was, halfway through that time period. The really interesting thing I discovered as I was looking at that survey were the recommendations. And this concept of social capital was peppered all throughout those recommendations. I started wondering, what's this social capital? What's this all about? And that prompted me to do quite a bit of research and reading at that time. And that influenced my work over the next, 6 to 7 years that I was in the role as Assistant Regional Director. And here's what I discovered about social capital. So James Coleman, in Social Capital in the Creation of Human Capital, defined social capital as coming about through changes in relations among persons that facilitate action. So to describe this, and let's contrast it, human capital for me is around what sits within the individual. So it's the individual's cumulative ability, their knowledge and skills, their years of experience contribute to their human capital, their formal and informal education, their knowledge of curriculum and pedagogical strategies, what they hold within the individual. Social capital is what happens in between the people. So this is, for example, where teachers are coming together in professional learning communities, where there might be advice networks, where they go to for information, who they collaborate with, who they bounce ideas off. So it's social in the sense of its interaction with others. And I just want to point out that when you dig into social capital, it's not about shared cups of coffee and talking about what you're doing on the weekend, because the word social can lend itself to that kind of, what would we call it, casual or informal conversations. It's not that. It's about interacting with others to collectively do better work. Conversations, particularly in the leadership space, about challenges, pressure checking your thinking, your decision making, gathering alternative perspectives, uncovering assumptions that you've made, and certainly, highlighting any oversights. See, here's the thing, and it's an irony. I see it for leadership not as a solo sport, but as a team game. And there's a myth in school leadership that the capable leader figures it out on their own without burdening others. And that myth is doing real damage. Pressure reduces when the thinking is shared. And it's not because someone else takes the problem away. It's because another perspective can break that cognitive loop that you have where you're stuck in the rut of thinking through the problem in exactly the same way. A circuit breaker, I think, would be a good phrase as well. If you see yourself as a trailblazer and you're looking for structured, strategic support to lead with clarity and conviction, visit trudygraham.com.au/connect. That's where leaders begin the conversation about working together. I'd welcome the opportunity to partner with you. I've really thought about social capital for school leaders, and I've actually mapped this out. Social capital should be built in multiple levels and layers. So I think about this around building it within your school, in your leadership teams, with trusted colleagues or a peer network at level with you, like the principal down the road concept. And obviously with your line manager or supervisor and with coaches or mentors. And of course, when I came to this research, I was in that role and it was about that relationship with principals. So how do I build social capital with them? But also, how do I help them build social capital with their colleagues, with their peers, that support group where they can talk through the tough, complex stuff with others? And what I discovered in that research back then and applied and invested my time in my role as an assistant regional director, I committed to and created what we called then leadership forums for school principals. Now that I work as a coach and a facilitator, I ensure that all of my programs create social capital at the core. I don't call it that publicly, and it looks more like connection across leadership circles and creating communities where leaders can talk honestly with colleagues about the real challenges that they face. And I'm not the only one with this thinking. Like I said, this was born from the Australian School Leader Occupational Health and Wellbeing Survey. Andrew Hargraves and Michael Fullan also wrote about it in The Power of Professional Capital. And let me share what they wrote. They said, human and social capital are both important, but human capital is not as influential as social capital as a lead strategy. To enact change faster and more effectively, to reduce variation in effective teaching in a school, or between and among schools in terms of networks, our advice is to use social capital. Use the group to change the group. And I've actually been in a room and heard Michael Fullan quote that last part, use the group to change the group. And I think this is really fascinating and we don't give enough credit to it. There's lots of work done around professional learning communities and how to build social capital between teachers and getting them to work together around instructional practices and how to meet student needs better. But I just don't think there's enough work in how we bring together leaders across schools and build really strong social capital and create a space, psychologically safe spaces for them to talk about and benefit from that shared thinking with peers. To finish up this, there's also some really interesting research. Principal social capital has been found to have an impact on the overall performance of a school. So Kari Lena and Fritz Pill deemed principal social capital was significant in terms of school-wide student achievement. Schools with principals who spent more time building external relationships with parents, community groups, or foundations were found to have higher levels of quality instruction and better student results in reading and mathematics on standardized assessments. Okay, so that's shared thinking. Next up, augmented thinking. So sometimes the issue for school leaders isn't time, it's processing capacity. And I've already talked about, volume, complexity, and the high stakes. And my work over the last 3 years now has really highlighted that this is where AI becomes genuinely useful for leaders. It starts as a productivity tool, but it becomes a thinking partner. And when you're at cognitive capacity, you can't generate new ideas or new angles to look at a problem. You go around and around in the same loop. AI can help break that loop. If you give it context, you ask a question, and it gives you something to react to. Sometimes the most valuable thing isn't the response, it's the clarity that comes from having to articulate the situation clearly enough to ask. When you're thinking stretched, you need something that stretches it with you, and that's augmented thinking. And this is where AI can come into play in terms of supporting data-informed decision-making, automating routine administrative tasks, enabling more structured planning. Leaders report that it improves efficiency, and of course it's time-saving. They get access to organisational information faster, it reduces the admin burden, and it allows them to concentrate on pedagogical and strategic priorities. It's really important, though, to treat AI as a complement to the human dynamics of our roles. AI operates from algorithms, it's brilliant at data processing, looking at statistical patterns, working with words. The skills of discernment, evaluation, judgment, and reflection are even more crucial now. People want that humanness that we bring to leadership. So for school leaders in particular, this framing feels really important. The human qualities that make a great principal, things like reading a room, ethical decisions, building relationships that bring a community together, they still stay with us. The AI can't replace us in that way. And with that, I actually weave AI through masterclasses in all of my leadership programs, showing school leaders how they can use AI to augment their thinking, how they can leverage it to assist with the volume and the complexity of the work that they have in front of them, and use it to really assist them to move forward and to get out of those loops, repetitive loops of thinking, and to shift that. Across this podcast, you'll hear leaders navigating complexity with courage and clarity. If you'd like to see how that looks in practice, visit trailblazingschools.com/field notes. These field notes capture real stories from school leaders using AI as a thinking partner, strengthening leadership, not replacing it. It's free, practical, and designed to prompt your own next step. You'll find it at trailblazingschools.com/field notes. And the last of the keys that I have incorporated into the work that I do and have seen real success for school leaders is solution-focused thinking. This is about shifting the focus from problem solving and thinking about and analysing problems to using a way of thinking and a framework for looking for solutions that move us forward. Solution-focused thinking really shifts the orientation from what's wrong and why to looking for what's working and what can we do more of, or what do we want instead. The research suggests this isn't just naive optimism, it's a more efficient cognitive and relational strategy for decision-making under pressure. Now, I went searching, and I actually used AI to help me with this. I was really curious to see if there was any research around solution-focused thinking with school leadership. And this is what I actually discovered. So the clearest finding from the school leadership research is the link between solution-focused approaches and staff outcomes. Osdeem and Caesar, it's Sezer, two researchers from Turkey with a sample of 246 teachers, showed a statistically significant positive relationship between solution-focused school leadership and teacher job satisfaction, with the approach helping teachers notice their own existing resources and building their confidence that solutions are possible. Critically, solution-focused leadership also correlates with reduced organisational cynicism and increased school commitment, which are exactly the conditions that make decision-making easier and better received. And on decision-making specifically, leaders who focus on solutions are better equipped to make decisions quickly and effectively, with the ability to weigh options and choose a course of action based on available information, rather than getting stuck in problem analysis loops. People and organisations don't function like machines. They are complex systems full of relationships, dependencies, and variations. And there is rarely a clear connection between this is wrong and this is how you make it right. I often used to say, problem focus makes you an expert at a problem. It doesn't make you an expert at finding a solution. Despite this, leaders reflexively dig into the causes and history of a problem as if more analysis would automatically create a better future. It rarely does. Instead, it costs time, energy, and focus. This is particularly resident for school leaders managing the complexity of human systems. So the interesting part here is the leader goes from carrying the solution to carrying the questions that unlock the solution. When leaders don't need to be at the centre of every decision, there's room for more strategic, responsive, and present leadership. This creates a more sustainable dynamic, particularly relevant for principals who are experiencing role overload. Solution-focused leadership increases team members' decision-making, their judgment and motivation, and the process focuses on what is working, how it is working, and how to keep it going, with a mindset of being quick to look at positives and increase them. For school leaders dealing with overwhelm, the research points to something important. I find this fascinating. The cognitive load of constant problem analysis is a significant contributor to burnout and decision fatigue. Solution-focused thinking isn't just a communication style, it's a cognitive regulation strategy that conserves energy, builds collective capacity, and produces faster, more co-owned decisions. I just love that. So the three keys working together. Shared thinking gives you perspective. Augmented thinking gives you processing capacity. And solution-focused thinking gives you forward momentum and direction. If you miss one, you're still looping. If you use all three, you've got a genuinely different relationship with the pressure you're carrying. Not a lighter load, but a more capable system for managing it. Before the next step, one question, and I want you to be honest with yourself. Which of these three, shared thinking, augmented thinking, or solution-focused thinking, are you most resistant to? And what does that resistance tell you? So, one practical next step. Over the next week, I want you to choose one of these three keys and deliberately use it with a problem that's been sitting in your head unresolved. If it's shared thinking, find one person you trust and spend 15 minutes talking through the problem out loud. Not to get advice, just to think alongside someone. If it's augmented thinking, open a conversation with an AI tool and describe the problem in as much detail as you can. Ask it to give you three angles you might not have considered. and then sit with what comes back. And if it's solution-focused thinking, take the problem and apply solution-focused thinking, right? And here's a couple of questions. What would it look like if the problem was solved? Identify what is working right now, and then what's one step that you could take this week that could move it forward? That's it. 3 questions, 5 minutes. The goal isn't to solve everything, it's to break the loop. Just once, and notice what happens when you do. And I just want to loop back as I close off to that idea that leadership isn't a solo sport, it's a team game. You were never meant to carry the thinking alone. So try one of those little exercises in the next week and notice what shifts. And I'd love you to reach out and share it with me. Until next time, take care. You've been listening to Trailblazing Schools with me, Trudy Graham. If this episode brought someone to mind, share it with them. You'll find further reflections, practical resources, and leadership tools in the show notes. Until next time, lead with courage, seek clarity, and keep trailblazing.